My name's Elizabeth Clower. I am the instruction librarian and business liaison at the Glen Ellen Public Library, and I'm the one who contacted Adam, and he so very graciously agreed to do this program for us again. He's done it basically once every 6 months for like 2 years now, practically. Very quick housekeeping. First of all, if you do have a question, please do type it into the chat. Please try not to use the Q&A. It's harder for us to keep our eye on that. So if you have a question or a comment, please type it into the chat. When you do type it into the chat, please make sure the chat is set to panelists and attendees so that everybody can see. Yes, Kathleen, you are on mute and you will stay on mute. We are in webinar style. So unfortunately, you will not be allowed to talk, but that is why you can use the chat to type in any comments or questions. I'll be keeping my eye on that. And then if something comes in, I will make sure Adam knows about your questions so he can answer them. The one last piece of housekeeping information I want to give you, this program is being recorded. It will be available for later viewing through our library calendar at geppel.org's library calendar. But also, if you'll see, if you move your cursor over your Zoom window, on the bottom, there should be a small button that says CC Live Transcript. There is closed captioning available for this, so if anyone has some hearing impairment and wants to get this started, you should just be able to click that button. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to Adam.
Perfect. Thank you, Beth. Again, I appreciate this opportunity really to talk about a subject that is not only really exciting for me, something that I'm passionate about, but kind of important to everybody. It's a topic, you know, organizing photos that doesn't always feel urgent to everybody, but it is kind of a funny time in the world right now in lots of ways. And many people are staying home for lots of reasons, between health concerns, between the fact that most of us live around Chicago and the weather's not very good right now. It can be a great time to tackle this project, especially coming off of the holidays. You know, people might have some time on their hands, they might be home a lot. It's really kind of the perfect project right now. So I'm going to share a few slides and talk about a couple of just basic ideas to get you thinking about how you might organize and preserve your photos. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the work that we do. And then I'll show you a little bit of this work in action, actually on my computer. And then I trust that you will probably have some questions. And so I'm going to try to do my best to reserve some time towards the end. Obviously, if there's some big stuff, Beth will interrupt me and we'll take those as we go. So let me start by sharing my screen. And I'm just going to go into full screen mode, and we're just going to talk at a high level about the idea of preserving your family photo legacy. My wife and I have 4 kids, and some of them are in high school, and sometimes dinner conversation is a little challenging with teenagers. And so my wife and I are very relational. We love to talk to people. We love to talk with our kids, even if they don't want to talk to us. And so my wife got one of these little packs of like conversation cards, right? And one of the conversation cards, I can't even make this up, the other night, one of the conversation cards said, if you know your house was on fire and you had to get out right away, what 3 things would you take with you? What 3 physical things? And I thought, you know, it's a fascinating question. And inevitably, most people answer something about their family photos, you know, their wedding album, their baby book, their child's scrapbook, something like that. And it's a very common answer. And we think about that because it's important, right? It captures our memories. It reminds us of the people we loved. And so hopefully we can all tackle this project in a less dramatic fashion than a house fire, and get ahead of it, right? And so that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit, and in some major categories, thinking about digital photos, thinking about printed photos, as well as thinking about home movies and videos and stuff. So we'll talk about each one of those. So I'll tell you just a little bit about myself, what I do. So if you can see behind me, there's some hard drives and some boxes and some cameras. I'm just in my studio in Wheaton, where we organize photos. We love this work. We scan, we digitize, we organize. And I've been kind of in this world of design and photography and technology for a really long time. So through the years, I wrote all of those books about web design and graphic design and Lightroom and things like that. I've done a lot of technical editing on a lot of books about like Adobe Acrobat and Photoshop and Creative Suite and things like that. And I've also done a lot of training. I think deep down, I'm a teacher at heart. And so I love to teach. I love to train. It's part of why I love doing these events. And, you know, I've trained with a bunch of folks around the world, and I have a lot of certifications, just a training background, and love not only doing this work of organizing photos, but teaching people how to do it well, how to do it in a way that's permanent. And there's normally a lot of questions about that. So that's a little bit about what keeps me busy. And my company is called Chaos to Memories. Our little studio is here in Wheaton, and we work with clients all around the world to digitize and organize their stuff. And so I'm going to share with you some of our kind of top tips and best practices to do this job well. So just a few stats that I think are interesting. So over the last year, I organized about 8.2 million photos for our clients. They came from 905 different cameras and camera models. And we saved, mostly through deduplication, we saved our clients 12 terabytes. Even if you don't know the technology, just note that that's a lot of photos, lots and lots of duplicates. And so people love their photos, but sometimes they can become a burden and they kind of become overwhelming. And so the tips that I'm going to share with you tonight can help you cut through some of that and simplify that. And I think give you a clear game plan on how to approach, you know, an important project, but something that can be a little overwhelming. We're going to break it down into 3 categories. Just broad categories. The first one is digital. So here I have my phone. It could be a digital camera. It could be a smartphone, whatever it is. We take a lot of photos, maybe too many. And I love photography, but man, we take a lot of photos. The irony is if we don't get them organized and take care of them, we might shoot thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but we could lose them all, right? We could have a hard drive die. We could lose our phone. We could be relying on a cloud service that goes out of business. We want to take care of these. So if they're worth taking, they're worth preserving. And we'll talk about that as one main category. The second category is the physical photos, the prints, the negatives, the slides, all of that stuff. And then the third category, we'll just talk about this a little bit. It's a little bit more advanced, is what to do with video. The first 2 are definitely like a DIY possibility. You can do this at home if you want. The video is a little bit more advanced and normally requires some equipment that not everybody has, but I'll talk you through what's possible there. So those are our 3 main categories. So let's start with digital. Most of us have the most digital photos. And by the way, I'll throw some stats at you. Our average client has more than 50,000 photos, sometimes much more. I'm wrapping up a project where a client had about 7.6 million digital files. Another client that I just started working with has over 500,000. It's a lot of photos. You may have more, you may have less, but average is about 50,000. So we have a lot of stuff to deal with. And whether you shoot with your smartphone or like a really nice kind of real camera, or maybe just a digital point and shoot, what's interesting about these photos is they almost always have the correct date built into the file. And some of you know that may be news to some of you, but the cameras have some features that keep track of date and time. And so that's automatically captured inside the file, which is really helpful. And I'll show you why in a minute. What I do with these photos is it's kind of a simple 2-step process, and you can do this as well. I use Adobe Lightroom Classic. It's some Adobe software. It costs $10 a month for the software. And it also includes Photoshop, which is cool if you want to do some more advanced editing of your photos. But we really do 2 things, and I'll show you this in a moment. First, you just gather everything. If you haven't tackled this project at all, start by gathering, literally physically gathering old hard drives, CD-ROMs, memory sticks, all that stuff. Literally like gather it in the dining room or something, or in the office. Gather that stuff together and then gather it digitally, like copy it to one hard drive. Get a hard drive. I think you can see this one here. It's just a little external hard drive. They're about $50 on Amazon or at Staples, local technology store. Pretty expensive, pretty inexpensive, at about $50 for a basic hard drive. You can plug it in and copy all of your files to that drive, because if you don't gather everything in one place, you're never going to know how big the project is. It's just not going to go well. So gathering is the first stage. Step two is we generally start to sort that chronologically. And here, let me explain why. Some people with great intention say, okay, I'm going to organize my family photos. And let's say you have two kids, so you have a son and a daughter. A lot of people want to organize their photos around people because people are important to them, and that makes sense. The problem is there's normally more than one person in a photograph, right? So if you have a son and a daughter, well, what folder do you put the photo in when they're both in the photograph? And then you say, well, you could duplicate the photo, right? You could put it in the son folder and duplicate it and put it in the daughter photo. But that's kind of the opposite of what we want to be doing, where our goal is to organize and simplify. Duplicating is not reinforcing that simplification plan. And so instead, my suggestion, and we do this without exception on every project, is we sort everything chronologically, because it just always works. Nothing breaks a chronological system. Photos are, by their very nature, a capture of a moment in time, right? They're a memory, and they have a time. And so we do this with digital photos. We even do it with physical photos that we scan for clients. So, and it may not be perfect, right? I'll give you that leeway. We don't always do it perfectly, but we do it as best as we can, as well as we know. And that's why it's important to understand that digital photos, most of the time, have that capture date in there, and it's normally accurate. And that helps us sort that chronologically. So gather it all together and start to sort it chronologically. And the good news is you don't have to do that grunt work of sorting chronologically. There's software that will help you do that. So let me stop my screen share. I'm going to share a different application and show you what that looks like. So we are in Adobe Lightroom Classic. Again, this is very popular, probably the most popular photo organizing software in the world. It's $10 a month. And I have an empty catalog, like there's no photos in here. It's brand new, starting from scratch, and you could do this as well. And I just wanted to show you an example of what this could look like. So in Lightroom, I'm going to click the import button here on the bottom left. And this is going to bring up a window here. And basically it's pretty simple. It's just going to do three things for us. On the left-hand side, I'm going to tell Lightroom where to import photos from. So we talked about gathering those images, just copying them like to a hard drive or something. And you see here on the left, these are kind of realistic examples, right? You might have some photos from Instagram. If you do that, you might have some from your phone. You might have some exported from some other software. Maybe you have some copied from memory cards or CDs or DVDs, things like that. You don't have to worry about where it came from. Just kind of smush it all together in that gathered images location. In this case, it's a relatively small sample. It's just it says 138 photos, but they're real files. They're like almost 800 megabytes. And I'm going to tell Lightroom, look at these files. These are the files that I want to import. And then in the middle here, this is just thumbnail previews. And you can see it's kind of funny. Like there's real photos that you see we took on vacation. And then there's like some stylized photos that maybe one of my kids posted on social media. And then there's me accidentally taking a screenshot of my phone, right? Like all these kinds of photos that we all have, that some of them are important, some of them we're going to delete, but this is very, very normal. And we also have a little bit of video in here as well. And we have stuff from my phone. We have some from a real camera. Here's a video file, like totally normal things. And basically, I'm going to take these files and I'm going to copy them into a new place. And this is kind of the fun part of it. So there's lots of options here, but the part that I really like is Lightroom, and there's other software that will do this, but Lightroom has an option to import my photos by date. And hopefully you can see that on the screen there on the right. So Lightroom's going to look at the dates of all those digital photos, and it's just going to sort it out for me. And so you can see here, like over like a week where our family went on vacation, it's just going to organize them into date-based folders. And so once I see that, I just click import, and this might take a minute, a couple seconds, a minute. It's literally just going to copy those files, and it took that whole mess of stuff in all those crazy folders and put them in date-based folders for me. So that's a simple example of sorting chronologically where it's already done. It's making some previews, but the import process is done. And so taking a process that with thousands of photos that could be really tedious, this is very quick and simple. It organizes it by year and then by date. It's really, really helpful. And then as I get in here to specific folders, like here's a couple of photos apparently of like my pocket that I don't want to keep. So I'll just mark that to delete. Here's a screenshot of the weather. I'll delete that. Here's a screenshot of stock prices from my phone, like all these like accidents, right? Here's a duplicate, happens all the time. You can search for duplicates, and then I can just delete those, toss them, and really quickly, I'm starting to make some pretty quick progress organizing my photos. And again, the software has done the heavy lifting of making that chronological for me. And so it's just starting to make sense already. So I'm going to stop my screen share and pause. I'm going to look at the chat pod. Before we go back to any slides, I want to see if you guys have any questions or feedback on that, if those first steps make sense.
While we're waiting to see if anyone types a question into the chat, you obviously are using Lightroom Classic. You very briefly mentioned that there were other systems that did this as well. Could you just give 2 or 3 examples of what those are and why you would use one over the other? And I'm thinking specifically of the tagging, or not the tagging, the metadata.
Yeah, great question. So one of the other pieces of software that does a really good job at sorting files chronologically like that is a piece of software called it's a wacky name. It's called Big Mean Folder Machine. It sounds like a kid's rhyme. It's called Big Mean Folder Machine. I think it might be Mac only. But what's great about it is it's very inexpensive and it does the same thing, and it'll sort files any way you want into folders, date being one of them. So that's another one I recommend. Part of the reason I use Lightroom is that the tagging, we won't get into a lot of that tonight, but by tagging, I mean like adding names of people, locations, events like birthday, vacation, beach, mountains, hiking, things like that. When you do that tagging, Lightroom, one of the reasons I prefer it is it embeds the tags inside the file, so it's permanent. So even if I stop using Lightroom or share the files with somebody else, all of that organization and those searchable keywords, they travel with the files. One of the dirty secrets of photo organizing that is a real downer for many people that they don't realize is there's a lot of popular services like Amazon Photos, Apple Photos, Google Photos. They'll even tag your photos automatically, which you're like, well, hey, that sounds awesome. It is, but it's not permanent. Those keywords only live in that system. So if you change your mind and want to like use a different phone or something like that, or the company changes their mind and discontinues or changes the software, then all of your organization, all your people, places, all of that stuff gets lost. So it's faster, but it's not permanent. And my goal for my own photos and all my clients is for this to last like generations, not just like the lifespan of a phone, right? So those are some of the trade-offs and some of the reasons I use Lightroom.
Do you see we do have 2 questions in chat? Can you see that?
Yeah. Yep, I do see those. Thank you. So how do I mark for deletion? So in Lightroom, different apps will do it differently, but in Lightroom, it's very simple. I literally just hit the X key. The X key says like, I want to delete this. What's cool about it is it doesn't delete it instantly because sometimes I change my mind, right? Sometimes I look at with your phones, people use burst mode and they'll have like 10 pictures of jet skiing or something. And they'll delete most of them, and then they'll have a hard time deciding which one's really the best ones. So you can change that, narrow it down to your very favorites. And then when you're ready to delete, then there's a delete command that says delete all the rejected photos. So you get to confirm your decision. So that's pretty simple, just the X key. And then Arnold's asking, does the import process delete duplicates or does Lightroom import everything? Great question. I actually skipped over that on the import. Lightroom does have an option when you import to ignore suspected duplicates. It's not perfect, but it's normally pretty good. So there's an option that will help on the inbound. And then if it's not perfect, and duplicates are actually pretty tricky for a lot of reasons, there are probably going to be still some more duplicates. And so there's actually a free plugin that I use for Lightroom that you can find on the internet. It's completely free, works on Mac or Windows, that will help you find even more. And then even after I do that, I still find some that like were cropped, or there was a digital photo that was printed and then rescanned. Kind of crazy, but it happens all the time. You'll stumble upon a few more that you can then delete manually.
Would you mind giving us the name of that third-party app that you use?
Yeah, the third-party plugin, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know how to pronounce it. It's from a German guy. It's like Tika Chelson or something. It's totally crazy. I don't know how to pronounce it, and you won't be able to find it. But if you look for, not by the name, if you look for Lightroom duplicate plugin, you'll be able to find it. And it's totally free, easy to download, easy to install. I should contact the guy and at least learn how to pronounce it. I probably need something in German. Alrighty, so I'm going to switch back to slides. We'll keep talking through these concepts. I appreciate the questions. Excellent. So gather everything together, sort it chronologically with something like Lightroom. And even if you don't do the tagging and stuff, which is more manual and like a ton of work, even if you only do those two steps, you are going to be so far ahead of the game. You're going to start deleting duplicates. And the best part is you're going to have everything in one place. That's the terrifying thing about digital photos, is you don't even know if you've backed them up because you have them all over the place, right? Like I've literally talked to people who were like, I have a laptop dedicated to my first child. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we had a baby and we had a laptop. And then when he was like 2 years old, the laptop died and we still have it, but it doesn't work. And one day we want to extract that hard drive and get those photos off of there, right? Stuff like that happens all the time. So getting that stuff gathered is really important. Alrighty, then let me talk to you about a few other ideas related to digital. The screenshot on the left here, this is similar to what I showed you in my real example, right? Folders, names, stuff you download from the internet, stuff you copy from CDs and thumb drives and memory cards, all sorts of names. That's what it can look like when you gather it. That's totally fine. It's a mess, but it's okay. It's all in one place. Even that's progress.
Adam, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Of course, yeah.
Can you take a look in the chat? Sorry, you have to
Yeah, no, that's okay.
For a minute. I put the name of a plugin with a URL. Can you look to see if that name looks familiar to you?
Yes, you're awesome. Yep, that's it. Thank you. I wish I knew German. Yeah, thanks for finding that. Good stuff. So let's go back to the screen share. Let's look at the example. And again, on the left is like all the crazy stuff you gathered. Don't worry about organizing it. You're going to let the software organize it. This is an example. This is a real example of, turning all the crazy stuff on the left into chronological on the right. Again, even if you stop here, it's huge progress. If you want to take it one step further, I'll show you one other step I take. It's optional and it's less important, but it can still be helpful. When I'm working on a client project or my own photos, the photos start with names like you see on the left, IMG 5079. It's unique, but it's not descriptive. It's not super helpful. I use Lightroom, but there's other batch rename utilities for Mac and Windows. There's a better file renamer, and for Windows, a better Finder renamer for Mac. There's all sorts of batch utilities out there that are free or cheap. And I do this with them. right? So I rename those files something like 2006, 06, 02 birthday. And the logic here is 2006 is the year, 06 is the month, 02 is the day. And virtually all professional photo organizers will use this pattern because the file names, even if they get out of your nice little system, the file names still make sense. They're self-explanatory, they're unique, and they're chronological. If you do it other ways, like if you do, most of us in the US will do like month, day, year, that doesn't work well for photos over the years because then we have like 20 years of June together, which is not really helpful, right? Or you could call them all Christmas, blah, 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 but then you have 20 years of Christmas all strung together, and that's a crazy mess. So using this year, month, day, and then like an event, and then a sequence number is really helpful. And again, don't do this manually. Don't rename these one at a time because that's crazy and it'll take too long and you'll make mistakes. But most photo organizing apps have a batch rename feature that will allow you to do this really quickly. And again, it's not required, but if you really like it nice and tidy, this is a nice kind of last step in the process that makes things a little bit simpler. Alrighty. The end result, and again, we're going quickly here. There's definitely more steps that we could do, but the end result ultimately is that you have an archive that's sorted. That is, it's chronological and you've deleted most of your duplicates. It's searchable, at least by date, but if you add the keywords that I talked about, like this is an example, these are like baby portraits. You can add keywords to make it searchable. And when these two happen, when you have a photo archive that's sorted and searchable, they become shareable, right? Because you can actually find what you care about, whether it's a Christmas photo or whether it's a New Year's party or whether it's a birthday party, or maybe in the spring it'll be a graduation. Somebody, we have a high school senior who's going to graduate. We want to be able to find all those fun childhood photos. When I can sort and search them, then I can share them. I can print them, I can turn them into slideshows. That's kind of the payoff of all this work, which is tedious, but it's worth it when you can share those photos. And then the last part that I also love is your photos are secure because you've got them all in one place instead of being spread across like 5 computers and a bunch of iPads and a bunch of CDs and drawers. They're all in one place. So that means they're secure and they're easier to back up. So that's the end goal. Yeah.
Sorry. We did have a question in the Q&A, and just a reminder to those of you who are here participating, if you could put your questions in the chat, it's easier for me to keep my eye on them. But we did have a question. It says, can't you put spaces between year and month? And why did you put an underscore when a space in the file name works?
Yeah, good question. So there are lots of possibilities here. I've been doing this work for about 25 years, organizing digital assets. And so part of that is, honestly, it's just out of habit. You can use spaces, you can use dashes. The things you don't want to do, you don't want to use like super weird characters. You never want to use dashes, slashes. You never want to use slashes or semicolons. And I would strongly suggest you not use more than one period. Right? You can use a period like here between the file name and the file extension, but I wouldn't use a period anywhere else. But otherwise, that's fair. You can use underscores, dashes, spaces, really wherever you want. This just happens to be my habit. But if you want to tweak a little bit, as long as it's kind of within the rules, that's totally fine. Alrighty, so again, this is our goal. And I will say that it's helpful to have a goal in mind because this project can take a long time. It can be tedious. I think it's totally worth it because they're your memories and they're great to share. But having that goal in mind is helpful to keep you going when it's not as fun. Alrighty, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about physical photos. So those are some best practices for digital. Let's talk about physical photos. Over my shoulder up here, there's a little bit of photos up here. Mostly those are empty boxes, just ready for future projects, but lots of stuff over here is client photos and stuff that we're working on. And we named our business Chaos to Memories because that's kind of what we do. We get crazy stuff. We get boxes, we get envelopes, we get bins and albums. We've seen it all. And it's probably like what you have in your closet, in your basement, in your crawl space. It's kind of all over the place. And so having a plan for this is also really helpful. We kind of take, like, these are real photos, like on the left, this is kind of stuff we pick up from families, and then we turn it into what's on the right, which I think looks really neat and tidy and peaceful. But there's a lot of work between the left and the right. And so some of the things that we do that are helpful are we start by scanning all of the physical photos. So when it comes to either photo prints, which you see on the left, or artwork, documents, diplomas, marriage licenses, all those kind of like family heirloom documents. In this case, this is a painting from my daughter. She's a little budding artist and very creative. We scan all of this stuff at 600 ppi. It's one of the most common questions I get. What resolution should I scan at? We recommend 600 ppi for all of the basically like prints and artwork and documents. If you have a scanner, you may know that it'll scan higher, right? It may say up to 1200 ppi or 4800 or some crazy number. You can scan at those higher resolutions, but what I will tell you is it's probably a complete waste of time. The scan will take a lot longer to do. It will take up a lot more file size on your computer, and it'll almost never capture any more real quality, right? So for reflective stuff, 600 ppi is the goal. I wouldn't do less, but I wouldn't waste time with more either. So that's our goal on scanning physical, like reflective print and artwork and documents. Let me pause there. There's normally a fair bit of questions. Anything coming up on that one, Beth?
Not yet.
Okay.
I will give a piece of information out while we give people 10 or 20 seconds to type if anyone has a question or comment to type, which is, and I will admit that I'm slightly hesitant to tell all of you this, but we have just started at the library. We have what we call the conversion room, which has a high quality scanner in it. The conversion room, of course, because of COVID, is shut down, but we have just started sort of informally putting together a kit that people can borrow a scanner to take it home and use. If you have any interest in that, email me and I'll connect you to the person who's heading that up. It's not ready for sort of mass use at this moment. And I will put my email in at the end of this program, so you have that information. But just keep that in mind. If you just are so gung-ho to get this going and you don't have access to a quality scanner, email me and I might be able to help you with that. And while I was saying all that, oh, wait, we got something in the Q&A.
Yeah.
I have, okay. I have PlusTech, PlusTek, PlusTech ePhoto. Once the hard copies are scanned in, can they be imported into Lightroom?
Yeah, great question. So if you've already scanned material, Lightroom supports all of the major digital photo formats. So JPEG, RAW, even PNG, like the screenshots from your phone. It supports many video formats. It supports the new HEIC format from iPhones and iPads. So it's pretty generous in terms of what it supports. So if you've got JPEG, TIFF, whatever you scanned in, I suspect Lightroom would have no problem importing those scanned photos. The trick is, just so you're not surprised, let's connect these two worlds. When you scan a photo, let's say you have a photo from 1980 and you scan it in 2021, the date of that is going to be 41 years off, right? That's a little goofy. Lightroom actually does have a feature where it will time adjust the photograph. You have to know the date, right? It's not magic. But if you know the date of the original capture, you can actually scan it and then adjust the date in Lightroom so that the chronology makes sense. You don't have to, but it's a helpful thing if you want to.
We do have another question that says, is there any value in keeping old negatives? I have tons from my parents.
Yeah. So I could not have paid you to ask a better question. So let's look at the next example. Let's talk about that. So there's another category of photograph, and we call these transmissive photos. It's kind of a technical term. You'll notice back here on this slide, I talked about reflective media. The reason we call it reflective is we only see this stuff when light reflects off of the photo print or the artwork and comes to our eyes, right? So we call that reflective. The other category is transmissive. This is what we see when light transmits through either a slide, which you see on the left, or a negative, which you see on the right. And the guidance here is that you want to scan these at 4,000 ppi. When you say, why in the world, like why is that so much higher than the 600 ppi for prints? There's two reasons. One is this is a more like detailed capture, right? It just holds the information more densely. It's also much smaller. You know, you remember little negatives, they're pretty tiny. Some of them are really tiny. And so because that information is so dense, you have to scan it at a higher resolution to get all of that information out and be able to do prints and photo books and slideshows and stuff with that. So the goal for this material is 4,000 ppi. And this is the ultimate answer to the question about the negatives. So on the left is a photograph. This is a photograph I took in the summer of 1989 in Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite National Park. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and I plan to hike through there this summer, health and travel permitting. I plan to get back there. And on the left is a real photograph of a print. On the right is a scan of the negative. And this is not a great picture. I mean, like I was in junior high, it was a cheap camera. This is not a gem of a shot, but it's a good memory for me. And so what you see on the right is higher quality, higher resolution, better color. And if you really look closely, there's actually even more of the image, because like on the left here, these rocks were cropped out because that just happened when they were automatically printing your photos at the drugstore. But if you can get access to the original negative, oftentimes you can get like another 10% out of the photo that was cropped in the print. So again, print on the left, scan with a flatbed. On the right is the negative with a camera scan. Much, much higher quality. So if you have the negatives, definitely keep them. Please don't throw them away. That's what a lot of people do because they don't know what to do with them. Keep them, and that's, if at all possible, that's what should be scanned. The last thing I'll say is if you only have the prints, then that's what we'll scan, right? But if you have the negatives, that's preferred.
When more questions come in, it
Yeah.
says, we have written on the back of many pictures information on each one. How do we save the notes?
Great question. So that goes back to the topic of metadata, which we've covered in other sessions with the library. We don't have time to get into it in detail tonight, but in summary, I mentioned that your digital cameras capture the time automatically, and it embeds that in the file. So the computer recognizes, oh, you shot that in the summer of 2018 when you were on vacation. How convenient. Now it knows the date, but it doesn't know that I was on vacation in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. For that to be added, I need to do that. And again, it's kind of grunt work. It's not glamorous, but you can take that information, places, events, dates, people's names, all of that stuff, and type that in to software like Lightroom. And the beauty of that is it gets embedded inside the file. So just like your notes are kind of embedded on the back of the photo, you can embed those keywords inside the digital file, and it stays with it and it stays searchable.
And you do that inside of your Lightroom software.
Yeah, that's right. And that's my only caution is you want to make sure that you're using software that embeds that permanently. There's a lot of software like Apple Photos, Google Photos, Amazon Photos, all sorts of stuff that will either let you add keywords or even do it automatically. Like there's some real hocus pocus magic that's super cool and time saving, but it's not permanent. So if you're going to go to the effort to do all this work, you just want to make sure it's permanent and embedded inside the files.
And Nancy asks, how do you store negatives?
Yeah, we store negatives like in these boxes. We start with a like a plastic sleeve. We use a brand called Print File. You can find them online at printfile.com. They make sleeves and sheets for all different formats of negatives. And we take those, we normally pair them with their prints inside a nice paper envelope, and then just store that in boxes. And the general advice is photographs should live where people live. So think about that for a minute. What that means is you wouldn't put a person like in a crawl space, in an attic, in a garage. A lot of photos get stored there, but they're not good for the photos. So basements, attics, near water, those are all bad choices. To preserve your photos, like in a ground floor, like an interior closet is a great place to store them. It's a great way to keep them safe long term.
And you're using the word photos, but do you also mean negatives? So you should also store negatives where people live?
Correct. Yeah, any analog photo material, so prints, negatives, slides, documents, you name it. Yeah, treat them well. They've been around this long. Let's keep them safe.
All right. So if you have negatives and black and white prints of the same photo, do you scan both media types?
Good question. I don't scan both. If I have both, I will scan the negative, whether it's color, black and white, you name it. I'll almost always scan the negative because, again, we get better quality, better and higher resolution. If for some reason I have the negative and they're very badly damaged, very scratched, maybe infested with mold, maybe brittle and decaying, something like that, there's lots of things that can go wrong. If there's something like that, then very occasionally we would scan the print, but normally I just scan the negative and that gives us our best caption. There's no need to do it twice.
If you embed the notes into the file, how is it accessed, especially if it's shared with others?
Yeah, great question. So there's two dependencies there. One is just because the information is embedded in the file doesn't mean somebody else knows about it, right? So that's part of the value in naming your files clearly, because not everybody's as tech savvy as you're going to be after this session, so they might not realize it's there. So good file names are helpful. One of the best ways to share files is via like an online gallery. So I'm really fond of SmugMug. It has a goofy name, but it's a really great service. So they, for about $50 a year, offer unlimited storage for all of your photos. And you can have a bunch of privacy and security controls. And because I embed all those keywords and names and stuff inside my files, when I send them to SmugMug, when I upload them to my SmugMug galleries, because it's a photo service, those keywords are safe and embedded. They're inside the files. So then anybody who goes to my galleries, cousins, my sisters, my parents, things like that, I can send them to that gallery and they can search for that information. It's actually a really nice experience. And they don't have to worry about having the right software or receiving like a million email attachments from me. They can just go to that site and view them that way and search them.
If you scan the negative only, how is that saved for viewing, labeling, and sharing?
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. We scan the negative. If it is a negative, it needs processed in the computer to look like a positive, right? Like you see here on the right. And once we scan that, we embed, again, that same metadata, the keywords, captions, names, places. We can embed that inside of digital photos, scanned photos of any format. We even do it inside of converted video, which will be the last topic we talk about. But we can embed those searchable keywords in all of those formats, regardless of where they came from.
All right, I don't see any other questions right now. I think we've only got about 15 more minutes, so why don't you go ahead and get on to the next topic.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds good. Great questions. I appreciate them. So yeah, here we are. We're at the last topic, and then we can do some more questions. Generally, any format, any video format can be converted. So on the left here, just an example of a VHS tape, Behind me, some of the stuff over here on the in the wall or in the shelves is a bunch of old video cameras. So the trick is I have a bunch of these. Most people don't have these, or they don't work anymore. They don't have the power cords or whatever. That makes this project a little bit harder to do at home, because you will need either a VCR or a camera that was compatible with your original tapes. If you still have them, great. But you'll need that, or buy it, borrow it, find it, or something like that. But basically, all of these tapes can be converted to digital. You'll need a computer, you'll need a videotape or the VCR, and then you'll need something to go between the playback device and the computer. I use a device called, it's from a company called Elgato, E-L-G-A-T-O, the cat. Elgato, and they make a video capture device. It's about $100. It's not the cheapest one, but it's not the most expensive. It does a great job, and you can connect that to a computer. It takes forever, right? If you have a 3-hour VHS tape, it takes 3 hours. There's no way to speed this up, but you can convert that, as you see here, into an MP4 file. You may not know what MP4 is, but it's a digital video standard that's behind websites like Netflix and YouTube and Hulu and everybody, right? It's like the global video standard. It's good quality. The file sizes aren't too big. And as you see here, I'm using the same naming scheme. So I can assign some dates to these. These happen to be real files from my childhood in the 70s. These were actually shot on Super 8. These were converted from Super 8 reels, digitized, and then again we just build some chronological archives to these, and I can share them with all of my family, and we can see and access that stuff again. Watching stuff on a VCR is somewhere between difficult and impossible. I don't think they made VCRs for like 15 years. So it's getting harder and harder to preserve this stuff. So you might need help with this part, but the good news is all of this stuff can be digitized and you can enjoy it again, just like you can your scanned photos and your digital photos.
I have a question that refers back to what we were talking about before with negatives.
Yeah.
Does the software, and you had made a comment about if you scan a negative, you then have to convert it into a positive, essentially. Does the software then convert the negative into a positive photo?
Good question. The answer is it depends. So it'll depend on how you're scanning it and what kind of device you're scanning it with. If you are using a scanner like a flatbed, like the library has, then it's going to include some software that will convert that negative for you. And it does a pretty darn good job. We do our scanning a little bit differently and use some more specialized software that gives us an extensive level of control over all sorts of details. So we can be much more nuanced with it. If you use a flatbed or something like that, it'll just give you what it gives you. You don't have too many controls over it, but generally it does a pretty darn good job.
Okay, I don't see any other questions right now.
Okay. Let's see what I was going to mention about the video. One practical use of all of this video if and when you convert it. Some of the stuff can be long, right? Like I just talked to a woman today who's going to bring me her 3-hour wedding video, right? Like the wedding, the wedding, the reception, all of that stuff. A 3-hour video is pretty long, super fun to have, but it can be long. So 2 possibilities here that can make that a little more digestible include you can trim up the video, right? So oftentimes on these old VHS tapes, you'd have Christmas, spring break, Easter, summer vacation, summer camp, back to school, Halloween, like all sorts of stuff, little clips on the tape, 5, 10, 15 minutes here and there. So a lot of the capture software that's is used to capture these tapes will let you trim and cut that up a little bit. So you can make more discrete clips, which is exactly what I've done here. If you notice, like these were shot in October, November, December of 1979. And so I actually edited these into individual clips. So I might not want to watch 2 hours, but it might be fun to watch the Christmas clips at Christmas time, or, you know, the Thanksgiving clips at Thanksgiving. And so it makes them easier to find. The other thing that you can do with your video clips is you can get a free YouTube account, go there, and you can post your videos to YouTube, which may sound like, you know, maybe you don't want the whole world to see that stuff, and that's okay. Instead, you can list it as a, you can post it for free as an unlisted video. So that means that nobody can search it, nobody can find it or stumble upon it, but they are yours to view and to share. So with an unlisted video, you could send a link to that to your kids, to your grandparents, to your cousins, whatever it is. So within the family of people you trust, they could see it, but you don't have to put it out there for the world to see it. And it's a great way to share these files, which can get pretty big, but it's a nice free way to share that stuff. Alrighty, so let me see. Oh, just the last two, kind of two last slides that I'll wrap up with very briefly, and then see what other questions you guys have. Just to give you an overview, we didn't cover all of this tonight, but we basically have 5 main phases that we go through for every project. And this could be a helpful checklist for you as you think about your own project. So the first one we talked about was gather, whether it's digital photos, videotapes, or digital, you know, digital, physical, or video. Just gather everything together. Get it in one place, get it on one hard drive, get it in one box, gather it together. That'll help you understand the scope of your project. The second step is to preserve it. And by that, I mean, if it's printed photos, get them scanned. If they're videotapes, get them converted. And then we can start to work with them digitally. And then the third phase is once we have them preserved and scanned, that's when we organize them. We start sorting them chronologically, assigning dates, adding keywords, so that those family memories start to become searchable. The fourth step is once they are organized, then you can share them. And that's like the payoff. That's the super fun part, when I can, again, you know, we've got a high school senior getting ready to graduate. In an instant, I can find every single first day of school photo of Katie out of our family photo archive, literally in 1 second. That's pretty cool, right? And then I can make a montage or a slideshow or video, whatever I want to do with it. So being able to share that stuff is really exciting. And then there's one kind of surprise, it's a gotcha, but I don't want you to forget about it, is you're going to have to maintain this, right? Because we keep taking photos. As long as we're alive, we keep taking photos. So be ready to maintain it. And it's no different. It's the same process, but just be ready for that. So even if, as you catch up from the past, then you'll want to have some new habits for the future. So those are the 5 main phases that we go through. I've got one last resource to share with you guys, but let me pause there and see if there's any questions about those main phases.
Not about the phases, but we do have several questions kind of referring back to what you were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
The first one says, I have converted all of our VCR tapes to DVD. Should I further convert these discs to another format?
Yeah, I am so glad you asked. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. You absolutely need to. And here's why. DVD is a very convenient format, but it is not a good long-term format for 2 reasons. One is all it takes is a little scratch and that whole disc becomes unreadable. And I don't mean to scare you. I do want to warn you and be realistic. One scratch and the whole thing's toast. And so you'd lose everything that's on there. If you don't have the original tapes, needless to say, that'd be really sad, right? The other issue is if you take a CD and turn it over, on the bottom, you'll notice that it's normally one of 3 colors. It's normally green, blue, or purple. The reason it's colored, and that's different, right? If you go to Best Buy and buy a DVD, or you rent something, you borrow something from the library, you look it over, it's normally silver. Here's the reason there's a difference. When you buy or rent or borrow a CD or a DVD that was manufactured in a factory, they're actually pressing it with a big piece of machinery. When you do your homemade DVDs, that color, the blue, purple, or green, it's an organic dye layered between 2 pieces of plastic. And you guys know what happens to organic material? It decays. Even sealed in plastic, eventually it's going to decay. And the sad news is it can decay in as little as 18 months. And once it goes, there's no getting it back. It's gone. So I would recommend some software called Handbrake. It's free software for Mac and Windows, Handbrake, and it will rip or convert your homemade DVDs to digital video files like you see here that you can store on your computer. They're easier to share, easier to back up.
Do the movies go into Adobe Lightroom?
Good question. All of these videos, they totally can. My videos, I think all of my videos are in Lightroom. Sometimes if you have really long videos, like, you know, let's say I've converted a couple of 3-hour dance recitals, right? You could keep that in Lightroom. Sometimes it gets a little big and unwieldy. So sometimes you might just have like a separate folder with like the old family movies in them. But Lightroom will handle it if you want to toss it in there.
And you kind of spoke to this, but this person asks, and I believe is asking, once a person is done, sort of done in quotes, utilizing the $10 a month service,
Yep.
To sort and organize all of your past photos, etc., do you then have to continue paying the monthly fee indefinitely?
Yeah, super smart question. Good job to think ahead. The answer is no, you don't have to keep paying for that software. Here's the crazy cool thing about Lightroom is that once you're done all the organizing and the tagging and the editing and stuff, when you're done, all of your files, just like you see here, your files, your photos, all of that stuff, they're just still in folders on your hard drive. Other software like Apple Photos and stuff kind of hides them, it buries them inside its proprietary catalog. Lightroom just has them on your hard drive. So they're your files. They don't belong to Adobe. They don't belong to a subscription. They're just your files. And even if you end your subscription, you can continue to open your Lightroom catalog and you can continue to search, which is really fast and powerful. You won't be able to edit or add any new photos to it, but kind of that snapshot, that capture in time, all of that's still accessible and searchable, which is really nice. And you don't have to keep paying Adobe if you don't want to.
So I guess the difference then, and this is actually my point, so please do correct me if I'm getting this wrong. The difference then is that this is not a cloud service. You're not moving your folder, your photos up to a cloud service. You're keeping them on your hardware, and Lightroom Classic is a software you're using on your computer to hold your files,
Yep.
which in my case means I'd have to have an external hard drive because my photos can't all fit on my hard drive inside of my laptop. But
Yep.
the files are always on your own hard drive. It is
Yep.
not a cloud service.
Yeah, that's right. Completely right. And I appreciate that clarification. I do use cloud services, right? Like I mentioned SmugMug, I love it. I take all the files that I have organized and backed up safe on my hard drives, like you talked about. And then I have a copy of them on SmugMug so I can access 120 years of family photo archives. That's pretty cool. And I'm willing to pay $50 a year for unlimited storage. But you don't have to, right? You can just have this. The nice thing about having it organized on your hard drive locally is, you know, nobody cares about your photos like you do, right? Google, Apple, you know, they're great companies, whatever, but like they don't care about your photos like you do. So for $50, I get an extra hard drive, keep that backup, keep it safe. And that's what I advise to all of my clients. Yeah, you care about it more.
How do you scan in large documents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's see. I'll play with this a little bit. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to pivot behind that chair back there. That's my camera stand. It's actually a copy stand for camera scanning. And we use high-end digital SLRs to camera scan everything. And so we can scan really tiny negatives. We can scan delicate and weird things, and we can scan large things. If it's really, really large, I actually just the other week, I scanned a panoramic photo from, I think, 1918 at Fort Pendleton out in California of some military exercises. It was 38 inches wide by 8 inches tall, and we scanned it in pieces and then just used Adobe Photoshop to stitch it together. So if it's really big and unwieldy, it's actually not a problem. Just do it in pieces, and then there's software that'll stitch it back together.
We actually couldn't really see that because you're still screen sharing.
Oh,
So we're mostly seeing your slideshow, but also it is 7:30, which is the time the program ends. I try to be very respectful of people's time. So if you do need to hop off because you have something else to do, please know that you can always email me. I'm putting my email in the chat right now as we speak. Let me make sure I typed that correctly. You can always email me with any questions or say, hey, I didn't know this or that or the other thing. I'm going to be quiet and let Adam finish up. So if you can stay for a few minutes, please do. And then at the very end, we'll give you contact information.
Yeah, awesome. So Beth, can you see that screen any better now? Or my camera?
Yes, much better.
Yeah. So it's tiny, back here, but that's just my camera scanning rig. Again, it's like a copy stand with a camera and professional lights and stuff. So that's our way to scan large and odd items. It works really, really well. The last thing I'll mention as a free takeaway for you guys, normally when we do these in person at the library, we have a bunch of handouts for you to take home, which are like helpful checklists and reminders. But let me just share one last thing for you guys. That you can take home virtually. If you go to our website, chaostomemories.com/tools, we have a free PDF that you can sign up to get. It's a multi-page document that basically gives some details and best practices on a ton of the stuff that we talked about last night. You can even see in this little screenshot example, the phases that we talked about: gathering, preserving. We give recommendations for scanning resolution, how to, the file formats you want to use, best practices for backup, all sorts of stuff. So you can get that if you're interested. You can just download that for free tonight, take it with you, and that'll kind of substitute for the handouts that we normally give in person. So that's it from me. Beth, I'm happy to stay a minute and answer questions if people have any others, but I agree. I appreciate everybody joining. I hope it was helpful. And if you need to split at the end of the time, we totally get it. We're glad you could join us.
Absolutely. Thank you. I have put, I've copied the URL for Chaos to Memories in the chat.
Thanks.
So you can use that, connect real quick before you hop off, or just copy it. I do want to also say again, I put my email in there. So if you have any questions at all, you can contact me and then I will get your question to the correct person. I wanted to again mention that if you wanted to convert analog to digital, whether it's photos or VCR, or you have questions about converting anything else, please do feel free to email me and I'll try and get that to the correct person. Adam, do you have any email address that you'd be willing to put in the chat for people to be able to, or do you want them to just go through your website?
Yeah, no, that would be great. If it's not obvious, I love this topic. I think it's just really exciting, purposeful projects. And so I will put two things in the chat pod real quick. I'm going to put the full URL that's the chaostomemories.com/tools if they want to grab.
You need to switch your settings so it goes to panelists and attendees.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I want to make sure everyone can see this.
Yes, you're a pro. Thank you for the tip. That's good. And then I'll put my email there as well. So if folks have questions, if we can help you with anything, answer questions, steer you in the right direction. Obviously, we do this work. We also we do online courses for people who want to like DIY and tackle it themselves. We would love to help. So Adam at Chaos, I got to make sure I type my name right, at chaostomemories.com. We would love to help. Adam, yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing is that, again, we did record this program. Give us about a week or so, but if you go into the calendar at geppel.org and you look on January 5th for this program, there will be a link there that links to the recording. So if you're like, oh, I can't remember what he said about this, that, or the other thing, you can go back and rewatch the recording. So thank you all very, very much for attending. Any last minute questions? We'll give you about 20 seconds to pop them in. But otherwise, I'm going to say thank you so much to Adam. Again, he's done this for us numerous times, and every single time people really love it, and I learn something new every single time. So thank you so much. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so thank you so much, Adam.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great night. Stay warm, stay healthy.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.